The United States-Iran conflict has now entered a hardened phase of open war, with strikes and counter-strikes turning much of the Gulf into contested battlefield. And in this very tense environment, Russia has flown one of its most sensitive airborne command aircraft, the Tu-214PU, widely described as a doomsday plane into Tehran, adding a new layer of military and geopolitical complexity into an already volatile showdown. So in today's edition of From the News Desk, we will tell you how this very move not only deepens Russia's security ties with Iran, but also sends a very clear strategic message to Washington that Moscow is ready to support Tehran at a high level of coordination as this very war escalates. First, let's talk about the latest. The US-Iran conflict has entered a new and dangerous phase after fresh exchange of fire in the Gulf. According to the US Central Command, American forces launched powerful strikes in response to attack on 3 oil tankers, hitting more than 80 Iranian targets including air defense systems, coastal radar sites, missile launch positions and fast-moving boats. In fact, the US also says the aim was to impose heavy cost on Iran for unacceptable attacks on commercial shippings in an international waterway. Well, obviously, Iran answered by striking key US military facilities in Bahrain and Kuwait. In fact, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claims to have targeted a US Navy headquarters and an air base in Kuwait and reports at least 1 guardman killed while confronting US drones. Now, Kuwait condemned the repeated attacks while other Gulf states warned that continued strikes risk wider regional instability. In fact, these exchanges have also shaken global energy markets. Oil prices rose more than 3% after the recent strikes, with Brent crude climbing to around $76 per barrel as Qatar and Saudi Arabia said tankers from their fleet had been hit and accused Iran for the responsibility of such attacks. Remember, the United States revoked a waiver on Iranian oil sales that was part of the recent Memorandum of Understanding, arguing that Iran had violated the ceasefire by attacking ships and military targets near the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran's parliamentary speaker accused Washington of breaching the MOU and violating Iranian adjustments in the strait, warning that Tehran would take decisive measures. In fact, Iranian officials say the US strike hit Qasem Island, Bandar Abbas, injuring civilians and undermining the fragile interim deal agreed back in June. Now, into this escalating war, Russia has flown its Tu-214PU airborne command post to Tehran, a move widely read by military observers as anything but routine. In fact, flight tracking data shows a Tu-214PU entering Iranian airspace. Now, let's talk about this special Russian plane, which is also known as the Doomsday plane and also considered the Russian version of Air Force One for crisis coordination. Well, technically, the Tu-214PU is a specialized variant of the Tupolev Tu-214 airliner, rebuilt as an airborne command post with advanced communication and control equipment for Russia's top leadership. It is a wingspan of about 42 meters and a length of roughly 46 meters and a maximum takeoff weight of around 110,750 kilograms. Powered by 2 PS-98 turbofan engines, each producing about 16,000 kilogram force of thrust. Well, the aircraft typically cruises near 850 kilometers per hour and has a practical range of about 6,500 kilometers, with some specially fitted versions able to reach up to 10,500 kilometers thanks to an additional fuel tank. Now, unlike ordinary transport jets, the Tu-214PU carries secure encrypted communication systems, satellite links, and command and control suites that allow senior leadership to manage military operation even if ground-based networks are degraded or even destroyed. Now, certain reports also describe it as a flying control post that lets President and other top commanders direct armed forces and air defense units during a crisis period, functioning in practice as a mobile headquarters in the sky. Now, in military terms, deploying such a platform to Tehran matters for several reasons. First, it provides a highly secure node through which Russian and Iranian officials can communicate and coordinate during fast-moving operations with resilience against jamming or strikes on fixed command centers. Second, the presence of an airborne command post suggests that Moscow anticipates the risk of escalation and wants the ability to manage high-level decisions from or near Iranian territory rather than only from Russia. Now, for Iran, having this aircraft on its soil during the conflict with the United States signals that a major power is willing to plunge into its wartime decision-making architecture, at least temporarily. While the Tu-214PU itself does not carry any sort of weaponry, its secure communications, relay and coordination functions can actually help Iran integrate intelligence, share targeting data, and synchronize actions with Russian advisors or liaisons team, especially in areas such as air defense and maritime monitoring. Now, beyond the technical role, the arrival of the Tu-214PU in Tehran is widely seen as a geopolitical signal aimed at Washington and its allies. Analysts note that the aircraft belongs to Russia's State Special Air Detachment and is normally used for the President and Prime Minister, meaning its deployment abroad is reserved for moments of high political or military sensitivity. Now, bringing this flying Kremlin to Iran underlines that Moscow's alignment with Tehran is not only symbolic but extends into crisis coordination and strategic planning. Now, in optical terms, Russia is effectively telling Washington that it remains closely aligned with Iran and is prepared to back high-level coordination at times when US forces are actively striking Iranian territories and assets. Now, here's the most important part. This deployment complicates US calculations. Well, any further escalation against Iran now carries a greater risk of entangling Russian interest, especially in domains like cyber, air defense, and intelligence, where Moscow can assist Tehran without openly entering live combat. Meanwhile, the battlefield remains dangerous and very fluid. Iran continues to claim that it has destroyed or damaged multiple US assets in the region, from air bases and radar systems to energy infrastructure tied to American companies, and positioning these attacks as retaliation for American strikes. Now, US officials contest many of these claims but acknowledge that bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and other Gulf states have been repeatedly targeted by the IRGC. Now, recent incidents including Iran firing ballistic missile at Jordan's Azraq base and targeting US-used sites in Arifjan and Ali Al Salim in Kuwait, and Zufair and Sheikh Issa in Bahrain, while the US has hit Iranian coastal targets and infrastructure that support Tehran's grip over Strait of Hormuz. Well, each round of strikes deepen the perception that the war has moved beyond limited deterrence into a prolonged struggle over regional order and control of key sea lanes, including the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, the arrival of Russia's Tu-214PU in Tehran folds another major power into this very dangerous equation. As strikes and counterstrikes continue across the Gulf, the Doomsday plane on Iranian soil stands as a visible symbol of how the US-Iran war has become a wider test of competing security blocs in the Middle East. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of From the News Desk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goyal signing off for Times Now Digital. Until next time, take care and keep watching this space for more such videos.